school you all on why Tom is no longer terrific. Plus, why Jimmy G doesn't deserve much credit for Niners' success, according to Stephen A. And has Jason Garrett already been fired, but doesn't know it yet? Second hour, First Take, now.
An NFC South battle. If it wasn't for a missed field goal by the Panthers, then a made field goal by the Saints. Drew Brees and New Orleans may not have gotten the win. Even though New Orleans is 9-2, fellas, the team hasn't looked as dominant as early on. Here's their head coach, Sean Payton.
It wasn't our best game, and by far it wasn't their best game. And quite honestly, it wasn't New York's best game. And so it is what it is.
Stephen A., what's up with the Saints team? Are you worried about them?
I'm worried about them for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think them encourage their suspect. They're the 14th ranked defense for leaving in points allowed because they're the 14th ranked defense against the pass. I think that's something that needs to be noted. P.J. Williams gave up over 100 yards receiving, not to mention a couple of touchdowns as well. We can't ignore that. We also can't ignore the fact that when you look at some of the teams that they're going to go against, the San Franciscos, potentially Green Bay, and we've all know how I felt about them based on what I've seen. I'm going to throw a Seattle into the equations, potentially Dallas with their defense. Offensively, they may have some issues, but defensively, I think they'll be there when it really, really counts. You take all those things into consideration, and you are Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. It's almost like you have one target, and that one target is Michael Thomas. He's got 104 receptions for 1,242 yards in the season. 84% of the time that he's been targeted, he's connected. He's been connected by with Drew Brees. You know who their next leading receiver is? Their next leading receiver is Alvin Kamara, who's missed a couple of games and only has 421 yards receiving. Think about that discrepancy for a second. 1,242 to 421. That means there's really nobody else that's really seeing the ball. How is that going to work against some of the elite teams? Some of the elite teams in the game, as elite as Michael Thomas is, arguably the best receiver in football. We know how big time he is. He's getting $20 million a year. Nobody's blinked at that because we all know he deserves it. But what else do you have at your disposal? Particularly when you have an elite, great quarterback in Drew Brees, but one who will never be accused of being mobile. So when you have your quarterback as a stationary target, who is primarily targeting one dude, who, by the way, you're not capitalizing off of a running game that's just middle of the pack in the National Football League. All those things give me cause to pause, not to mention the fact that the games themselves have been far too interesting, more interesting than they should have been.
All right, look, if the question is, are the Saints unbeatable, the answer is no. But am I worried about them? We have to contextualize this. I'm also not worried about them. Look, their whole left side of their offensive line is not on the field right now. That's going to compromise you. They're getting a lot of penalties called against them. That's going to compromise you. You mentioned the offense in terms of receivers outside of Michael Thomas, who's an MVP candidate, right? Okay, there are kinks in the armor of every team. There's no team you look at and you can't nitpick. But what just happened yesterday? They beat their divisional rival in a close game where they played poorly but came out with a win. How did they really do it? With defensive stands late in the game. You know, like, well, he missed a field goal.
Yeah,
he had to kick a field goal because they didn't score a touchdown because the defense bent but didn't break. Like in the moment of truth, they held. And against your divisional rival, the only one really in it in your division,
Kyle Allen is their quarterback.
Okay, still, you got it done. Like there are going to be days like that. Divisional game, second place team, you didn't play well. The question is, do you come out with a win or not? They did, and we're going to kill them now. They're so good and so deep that without Drew Brees, they didn't lose a game. Teddy Bridgewater, and you might want to say going forward, could Teddy Bridgewater replace Drew Brees eventually? Maybe. But the point is, they're such a complete team that when you look for things, you say stuff like they're the 14th defense against the pass. It's out of 32 teams. That's pretty good.
Max, it was a little close for comfort, though, as Stephen A. mentioned, with Kyle Allen at the helm.
But
it's not
like Kyle Allen hasn't done anything.
We'd expect it to be a more decided score, I think, normally with the Saints. But one thing that is interesting that I want you to comment on, they are 6-0 this season in games that are decided by a score. We had the opposite of that with Phillip Rivers, right? The Chargers lose all games decided by a score. So they are winning. They are closing games.
They have a great quarterback. They have a great head coach. And by the way, all the penalties against them, when you have a great head coach, you expect that to regress to the mean, particularly when, in the moment of truth, you think the refs in a close call are going to go against the Saints again in a close game?
They better not.
You would think not. You would
Just
think at
in
this
terms
point
of pure
there's some
karma.
makeup call in the back of their minds.
Honestly.
Stephen A., the Saints are not unbeatable. But if we're looking for a divisional win against a second-place team where the defense held at the end in spite of 100, however many yards of penalties, I think that indicates they're pretty good.
Well, I think you look at teams in a vacuum far too more often than I do. I look at the level of competition that they're going against, and I'm anticipating who they may be facing down the road. And I'm asking myself, what are your strengths? And is that going to be enough to beat those particular teams? I have no problem. Of course, Michael Thomas is a lead. Of course, you should target him. I get all of that. What I have a problem is that when there's such a discrepancy between him and everybody else, and everything about you and your identity says that you're a one-man wrecking crew, that's the person that you target. I'm thinking against the better teams. Is that going to work? Now, obviously, you look at a guy like Alvin Kamara and you say to yourself, he's expected to be there. You look at a guy like Michael Thomas, you say he's expected to be there. Then when you look at elite teams and you say, excuse me, if I can find a way to dare Jared Cook to beat me or somebody else, can I pull this off? That answer appears to be yes. And all I'm saying is if you're the New Orleans Saints, particularly how you were unable to get it done last year, even though that bogus pass interference that was never called should have been called and what have you, in the end, I'm looking at them and I'm saying, excuse me, there's a question mark in that regard because their success has never really been about their defense. The defense plays a role. We expect them to step up. They're physical. They get after it. We know that. But it almost always comes down to Drew Brees having to save the day. And if that is the case, I need Drew Brees to have somebody else other than Michael Thomas to rely upon.
You know the expression like you're judged by the strength of your enemies? I think in this case, like you can judge the Saints by the kind of like nitpickiness of the criticism. A two-loss team who lost their starting quarterback for a huge chunk of the season, who just beat the second-place rival with a defensive stand at the end of the game, sure, and a little luck, in spite of a horrific game in terms of penalties and the whole left side of their offensive line missing, I think it indicates that we're nitpicking the 14th ranked pass defense. Like, that's a bad thing. That's actually pretty good. The fact that those are the criticisms of this team indicate what an excellent team it is, top to bottom. Imperfect, but I ain't worried about the Saints.
Or maybe how much we don't respect the Panthers, for that matter. We didn't expect them to be 31-31 at the end of the game.
Two-loss team at this time of the year is pretty good.
All right. By the way, Stephen A., you said 104 catches for Michael Thomas.
1,242 yards.
Yeah, through 11 games. That's the most in NFL history. He passed Marvin Harrison on that note. Still to come, Brady and the Pats got a close win over Stephen A.'s Cowboys yesterday. So why is Max about to call out his quarterback, Tommy Brady?
Get excited, football fans, because the NFL season is in full swing.
Can you believe all these storylines from around the league?
Which teams make the best case to take home the Lombardi Trophy?
Who will rise and who will ultimately